Welcome back to Second Breakfast. Today we are continuing our aggressively a la carte Star Wars coverage. We talked about the original trilogy and didn't like the third one at all.
Nope.
I think I can speak for both. Correct me if I'm wrong here. We like the original movie, Empire Strikes Back, the first season of Mando, Rogue One, and Andor.
Yeah.
And everything else
everything
is bad?
else is bad. Everything else sucks.
Everything else we have like strongly negative reactions to.
There is a charm to some of it, but for the most part, like I feel a lot of Star Wars fatigue, and in the similar way people feel Marvel, and I feel Marvel fatigue. But it's not even that. Like a lot of the Star Wars stuff, just like early on, is not my favorite. But
Sure.
the stuff you listed, I do really like.
Right, because the stuff that hits for us, we love. So I want to add, because there are a couple more things in that pantheon. And 2019 gave us Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which I think the Lego games are kind of a different thing. But I think that's the best Star Wars game we've ever gotten. That was a wonderful third-person action adventure. It was linear and it was narrative, great new cast of characters. And I've been really excited for the sequel, which finally just came out, 6 months ago, and I'm just now getting into it and playing it. And it gave me a bunch of thoughts about the series as a whole, so this episode is us sort of working through some of those identity crises and realizations and epiphanies that Star Wars Jedi Survivor sparked in me about the overall franchise.
I'm excited to talk through this with you. I did not play the game, but I did watch Cam play it a lot, and I'm excited to talk through it and bring my own whatever I have to this conversation.
So every new Star Wars movie, show, game, book, comic, I've experienced great Star Wars in a bunch of different mediums.
Sure, yeah.
For as many turds as there are gems. Gems, turds. There's really nothing in between.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah, I haven't watched anything or experienced anything in Star Wars that was like, well, that was okay. It was really one or the other. So yeah, I get you.
It's either Andor or Book of Boba Fett.
Right. There's nothing in between. Yeah.
So every new Star Wars project, movie, show, game, book, comic, they all wrestle with the same central question. And that is, what is Star Wars?
Okay.
And the trouble is that everyone has their own answer to this question.
Yeah.
Every creator and every fan.
Well, yeah, it depends on which property you like, right? Like if you love Boba Fett, your answer is going to be different from mine. So, yeah.
And the thing that makes it even more complicated is that Star Wars can be, and I would argue is, many different things. Because you could say it's all about the lightsabers or the stormtroopers, that costume design, the creatures. You could say it's all about Darth Vader and you don't care about anything beyond that. You could say you just want the big sprawling space opera and the dogfights and the ships. But spiraling even deeper into this question that's hard to answer, during our series that covered the original trilogy, I think we came to the conclusion that the best Star Wars is about change.
Okay.
And it's really tough to define something by calling it change, but that's what we loved so much about the first two movies, is that they moved so rapidly through locations and characters and ideas.
Yeah.
It felt restless and endlessly creative. That's why that universe felt so promising and expansive and liberating for us. And beginning with Return of the Jedi, it has been more and more self-reflective and redundant and navel-gazing and repetitive.
Yeah.
And derivative.
Yes, of itself in a really, really strange way. Yeah, you're so right.
Because there are things we all fell in love with in those first two. And so much of the new projects is just retreading that stuff. And obviously, it doesn't spark that same sense of wonder and imagination that it did the first time.
Sure.
Because Yoda's been in our minds for 45 years culturally.
Right. And it's also a challenge, too, because you think about something like the prequels, which take Star Wars in, I think, a really different direction than the original trilogy. So there's change in that way, but it's just not a change that either of us really liked. And so that makes it complicated. And
doing all the thinking I've been doing over the past week or so, playing through Jedi Survivor, I want to amend that sentiment that Star Wars is about change. Because I have a dumber idea now, and I believe it much more strongly.
Okay.
For me, Star Wars is about faded gray metal.
Oh, okay.
I settled on this during the opening hours of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, during a really awesome, beautiful cutscene ship battle. And I'd already had like a bunch of amazing moments. The set pieces the game throws at you to start things off are exhilarating. You have a great lightsaber duel, this awesome heist. You meet this crew of vagabonds and scavengers and all these like kind of cool criminals. You're doing like a little bit of an Ocean's 11 thing. It's really exciting.
Cool.
And all of that was great. But when my ship was racing through this endless dull gray Empire machinery, that's the moment where I leaned in and thought to myself, oh yeah, this is the stuff. It's something about the gray there. Like for me, Star Wars is a wonderfully drab industrial world cut with shots of color.
Yeah.
It's all about that balance, that contrast, that coexistence, because the color that lights up this world is the lightsaber blades.
Yep.
It's that blinding blue or green, or the way the red light jumps off of Darth Vader's lightsaber. Remember when he shows up in Rogue One and the whole hallway turns red?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's the blaster fire. When you've got those dogfights going through, black space with white stars, you've got that grayscale baseline. You've got red laser fire and green laser fire, and that's lighting up the night. It's a laser show. It's Trans-Siberian Orchestra. You have that like cornucopia of color, but it's on top of this rigorous grayscale background. You have these freaky, colorful alien creatures, but it's against this drab, dusty, kind of scratched up gray world. The baseline for Star Wars for me is a scratched up gray aesthetic.
Very cool.
And I realized this, of course, when it was taken away from me. I was playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and I had the option to customize my lightsaber. Very cool. You can even change the condition the lightsaber handle is in.
Ooh.
From old and ancient and worn to like pristine and shiny new.
Wow.
But the thing that troubled me is that there were colors other than gray available.
Oh, not for the blade.
No, not the blade, like for the body of it.
Okay.
You could make it like gold.
Ew.
And I was so scandalized.
Yeah.
I was so offended.
That's not what a lightsaber is supposed to look like.
And that was interesting to kind of question that knee-jerk reaction of like, why does it have to be gray? And then chasing that rabbit, how much of this world is gray for me for that color to really pop, I think. Because, again, I think the traditional Star Wars aesthetic of cold gray, industrial, beautiful, ugly, burned out misery, I think that's what you need for this world to then feel so exciting. And the thing that threw me and really reignited this identity question was the planet of Kobo, which is the main hub for Jedi Survivor. The big innovation in Jedi Survivor over Jedi Fallen Order is that it is very open world.
Okay.
And the world in question is Kobo.
Okay, so what kind of planet is Kobo? Is this the jungle stuff you've been playing?
Yes, it is. Kobo is it's like a big, gorgeous kind of rainforest. It's orange and green and overgrown and overstimulating.
Is it the same place where the Ewoks are, or is that different?
That's Endor.
Okay,
because Endor is basically just green.
Oh,
with
okay.
like brown.
Yeah.
The forest floor, basically. But this one is so orange. I mean, you've seen when you like select the game and it loads, that like splash screen that shows up is the like drenched orange sunset, and you can see the background is all colorful with this area, and it's the baseline basically is color.
Okay.
The baseline is orange everywhere, green everywhere, the blue of the lightsaber. It's all color.
But that to me doesn't feel like Star Wars.
And this is what sort of threw me, because it felt like a great Uncharted game. Because a lot of those are exploring ancient ruins and forests and looking for ruins.
It's very green and orange, very rainforesty. Yeah,
And
like very Temple Run coded.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
and so much of this game, the environmental puzzles, the storytelling is about traversal. And I would say even more than the first game, which felt very much like an action game, a little bit of Dark Souls in the combat. This one, I would say, is kind of a 3D platformer with everything else, because it is so much about the traversal of the environment, the puzzles, the climbing onto stuff, the wall jumping. Like, there are Mario moves in this game. But
that sounds like fun.
That means that I was spending all of this time swinging on vines and looking behind waterfalls and thinking about other games like Uncharted, to the point that I dressed Cal like Nathan Drake.
Oh, cool.
Like, just because it felt right.
Yeah, okay.
The further I got into this game. And that was fun. I was really enjoying myself, but it started to feel like I was just playing an open world RPG action game.
Okay.
And at some point, it didn't really feel like Star Wars.
Yeah, I would imagine that, yeah.
And then I started meeting Star Wars coded characters.
Okay.
Droids, who are polite and vaguely British. Stormtroopers and raiders and all these kind of classic... The game started playing the hits and pivoting back into classic Star Wars. And it provoked this sort of question and contrast because it didn't feel right. Seeing a stormtrooper in this like beautiful, colorful world.
Yeah.
Something just didn't work for me.
That's weird.
And I made it right again. I made things okay by changing Cal, that's the main character, changing his outfit. So instead of dressing him in the browns and khakis of Nathan Drake, I dressed him as drab as humanly possible. Nice. It's like toilet paper. I just the most beige and gray and white and boring like Tatooine outfit I could find.
Okay, yeah. Very like Luke or even Rey. Like they're wearing like pretty bare bones. Okay,
and
gotcha.
Immediately problem solved. It totally
Even though you're
worked.
on this brightly colored green and orange planet?
I just needed that base point of comparison for color.
I guess you're constantly looking at your character, right?
Yes.
So that aesthetic follows you wherever you go.
It's always on screen. And even if your brain's not really processing that image, you're still seeing it in the palette.
Yeah.
You know? Because it's not a really tight third person like God of War. It's a little zoomed out, but it's still where your eyes are kind of resting.
Yeah, and it's just offsetting all the other colors that you're looking at.
And if you think back to the original trilogy that we like so much, a lot of those characters are basically wearing boring grayscale shit. I mean, Luke is wearing the Tatooine beige, right?
Yeah.
Leia is wearing all white.
Yeah.
Darth Vader is wearing all black. And Han is wearing a white shirt with a black vest.
It's a pale yellow shirt, but yes, it's pale, it's beige. It's basically a beige shirt.
And most of those movies is them running through Empire locations, sneaking around, and it's all gray.
And Chewie's brown, and like Obi-Wan's wearing brown. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so I realized, and this isn't just about me like forcing Jedi Survivor into the old aesthetic that I'm comfortable with. I think I'm a little bit cracking the code on what works for me in this franchise, because I'm realizing that me changing Cal's clothes to look like traditional Star Wars, I'm pulling the same trick that lies at the center of the Mandalorian.
Okay.
Because whatever new color palette planet that Mando visits, we've always got him as a home base.
It's true. Our silver stallion.
3/4 of every show is just looking at the protagonist's face and reaction. And Mando, almost always with his helmet on, is a monolith of scuffed up light gray metal.
Yeah.
Which is what I just said was my key to Star Wars. And I think this comparison goes even deeper. Because you and I think, agree that Mando Season 1 is the best one.
Oh, 100%.
And that one evokes classic Star Wars without trying to be a classic Star Wars.
Yes, it's not just it's not cosplaying as A New Hope. It's doing its own thing, but it is still very much rooted in that world.
Yes, it's not so much about cameos. Season 2 throws Luke at you, and then more and more. I think it kind of piles on after that.
It starts to just become the member berries. Yeah.
It's not about cameos as much as it is about the ethos. It's the space opera. It's this expansive, curious universe. And Mando is this quiet, mysterious gunslinger at the center. And I think what we sort of came to as we watched Mando Season 1 is that it sort of felt like a Western.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this is, again, where I've landed with Jedi Survivor. Because the game almost takes, like Kobo as a planet, is sort of this like outcast planet. And everyone there, I mean, it sort of feels like the Outback. Some characters feel like they have Australian accents, and some feel like they're very, like, Southern, like American
South.
Southern.
Okay.
And if you put those two things together, you get very, like, Shrimp on the Barbie, Western sort of feel.
I know what you're saying, yeah.
Which is and I think it's why it took me a while to adjust, because Jedi Fallen Order was very much traditional Star Wars. That's what I loved. Harsh blue light, gray aesthetic, Empire stuff. Yes. And that's why I fell in love with that game so hard. And if you look beyond the colorful rainforest environment of Kobo, I think this sequel is like Mandalorian in that it is about Cal, who is, as he's older, there's a big time jump going into this game. Okay. He's now an adult. He is a kind, gruff stranger standing up for what's right, honoring the old traditions, settling old grudges. and literally strutting through a saloon that is your home base.
Cool.
So it's not so much in aesthetic, but in spirit and in ethos. This game is a Western.
Nice. Well, and that both of these with Mando and Jedi Survivor, this goes back to your thing about change. Like if Mando season 1 is very much like that original like classic Star Wars feel, but the new element is the addition of like the Western genre, like in this like Western gunslinger style character. Seems like Jedi Survivor is doing a similar thing. It's taking like that first game, which was very like classic Star Wars aesthetic, you know, industrial, broken down, scuffed up gray, right? And then here it's adding this different element of this new planet that's a little bit different, and then like that slightly like almost Mando flavored Westernness to it. But you know, changing but not too much. Like that's kind of like that push-pull balance.
Because there's in the original Star Wars movie, I mean, not even the sequels, just talking about the first one, there's a huge samurai influence in what George Lucas was thinking about and playing with. But I think to an American audience, we always sort of read that and interpreted that as like, oh, this is kind of a Western.
Yeah.
You know, we forced Han Solo, gunslinger, like making him more prominent in our minds, and the like dusty, you know, terrain. I think we turned into the frontier a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
And over time, as you start telling the story about yourself, that becomes the truth to you.
Yeah.
Star Wars became more of a Western than I think it started as, to the point where Mando season 1 is a Western.
Full Western.
Not in the cowboy aesthetic. It gets into that. Remember when Timothy Olyphant shows up and he's just a cowboy?
Oh, yeah.
Like it gets, you know, more and more transparent in that influence and that ethos. But I love that Jedi Survivor becomes a Western in a similar way, where you have a saloon. You don't have the clothes and the aesthetics and the music and the whistling. It's not Tombstone,
right?
But it feels like a Western. And I like that, playing with influence and reflecting on itself while constantly changing and making me uncomfortable the whole time, because it's not, oh, this isn't what I wanted.
Yeah, but you still are able to have some agency and make those changes to kind of help bring it back down.
And I'm still connecting it to, oh, this reminds me of other great Star Wars I like. But again, it's evoking a feeling without literally having the characters walk on screen and wave to you. Hi, it's me from your childhood. I'm back again.
Yeah.
Like it feels, Jedi Survivor feels classic and new while feeling familiar and fascinating. Like I still have the gray hilt on my lightsaber and my gloriously drab clothing, but that is the starting point for this story, not the end.
Yeah.
It's moving this world, this universe, this aesthetic forward while keeping what I want from it. You know, I can still have that baseline, but once again, we're moving into something else. I'm journeying again into the unknown after so many years of just retreading stuff I've seen and liked. Star Wars Jedi Survivor makes Star Wars feel curious again. And I think I'm not done with the game yet, but that is the greatest compliment I can give a new Star Wars project, never mind a game, never mind a sequel.
Yeah.
I'm just having a ball of a time with it.
That's really, really exciting and great to hear. I'm so glad that you've found, like, that you've made adjustments and, like, thought about it and, like, it's become a thing that you really, really like. That's really awesome.
How do you feel about this claim of it as a Western? How do you feel about sort of the color theory thing I was going into? Does that ring true for you in this series? What is Star Wars to you? Yeah,
I think so. I think it's like it has to feel a little fantasy and a little Western at the same time. Like Star Wars, there's a real American feeling to Star Wars that I think a lot of other like more fantasy style stories don't have, which is usually what I like. I usually like a more European feeling story. Like it just feels older and epic and grander to me. And I'm just a big fantasy person, much more so than sci-fi. But that like weird combination of more like American just style, you know, dialogue and themes and relationships, like, but placed in this, I mean, it's a space fantasy, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
I think those two things working together are what feel very Star Wars for me. So yeah, that Western thing sounds pretty like it belongs there. That's pretty great. I like it a lot.
Do you think of, because it was funny, I was customizing the lightsaber and I roped you in just because I knew you'd have an opinion on it. And it gives you like 10 different options for what you can make your lightsaber look like.
Yeah.
And I know, again, everyone has their own preference and rules here, but for me, the only canon options are blue, green, and red.
Oh yeah,
Like it
100%.
It gives you pink and yellow and
I know
orange
there's
and
purple,
white. And...
but none of those feel right.
No.
I decided to elect green because I elected for green because you were on this like more green planet. It felt more uncharted and that kind of thing. But I think you ended up selecting blue, right? Once you adjusted your clothes.
I regularly bounce back and forth between them.
They're both good.
But yeah, I don't know, because color has so much to do with this franchise. And I know it's not like there's one shade of one color. It's not that strict.
Yeah.
But it's just that muscle memory if something feels wrong. Like when we saw those speeder bikes in Book of Boba Fett, you viscerally just feel like, that doesn't fit. That's not Star Wars.
That's awful. Yeah. Yeah. I've never like articulated it in this way, but it really is so much about color. That's pretty fascinating.
And Kobo has so much color on it, but it still feels like Star Wars. Or we went to another planet in the game that was a desert planet. And as I was flying there, I was like, oh, God, again, Tatooine?
Yeah.
We can't get off Tatooine.
Yeah.
And this felt so different than Tatooine. It felt like game designers creating a really interesting desert planet.
Cool, because I've gotten tired of Tatooine. I think because it's so orange, and so it feels too bright, and I think Tatooine doesn't always work.
But it had a sense of architecture and topography and big, like kind of, not really... I don't know what you call big boulders that people make into squares, but like there were structures being built.
Okay.
There was a design and a culture around
rock formations and stuff, yeah.
And there was more topography to the dunes of the sand. Like it felt a little bit more like the world of Dune, the Frank Herbert Dune.
Great.
And then I got caught in this amazing sandstorm. I don't know if you saw that when I was playing that.
No, I did not see that.
But the light totally changed. So it's dark overhead. There's particle effects everywhere with the sand. But there's also the light of my friend who had a lantern and me having a lightsaber.
Yeah.
So there's color leaking and flowing in every direction.
Wow.
And there's this sandy background. And it felt nothing like Tatooine.
Wow.
Like I'm so impressed with this work of art because it is almost correcting a lot of, or outdoing a lot of the things I haven't liked in Star Wars lately without ever stopping for like a little victory lap or a taunt. It's just doing it better. It's not about any other work of Star Wars. It's just making a great new edition.
That's great.
Like there's a sense of editing that's very strong here. I'm really loving it.
That's so great to hear. I'm so glad you're loving it because I know that we always struggle. Sometimes Star Wars stuff is great. Sometimes we really, really don't like it. So that's really awesome to hear. And even though it does feel really different from the first game, which you loved so much, like you said, it feels more like a platformer. Are you sort of disappointed in the lack of puzzles? Because I know you liked the puzzle element of the first one.
No, because there are still some puzzles. The deeper I've gotten into the game, there are more of those. They're using kind of different powers and abilities that I'm unlocking. But no, I like the shift in focus here.
Okay.
I think for the third one, you could go a little less open world, but I'm very excited that it's been so successful and that they've been so confident in the design of both of these games. I think they're really going to stand the test of time like all of the greatest Star Wars anything does.
Cool.
So yeah, this is the question I want to throw to everyone listening and watching at home. Obviously, have you played Jedi Survivor? What do you think of it? But also, what is Star Wars to you? And I don't mean which one do you like the most. I mean that more mercurial thing of, for me, saying it's about gray metal. Like, what is Star Wars to you? What is that thing that you really click with and need in all of your favorite iterations of this world?
Yeah, especially because I feel like, you get so much variety among Star Wars fans, but particularly depending on what generation you grew up in. Like if you grew up watching the trilogy, like if that's like came out, like if you're older than us basically, or if you're like, Cam and I are kind of weird in that we grew up with the prequels, but we really don't like them in the way that a lot of people our age do. Or maybe you're younger than us and the new trilogy is like your thing. Like, so there's so much variety depending on how old you are, along with just personal preferences. So I'm eager to hear that in the comments.
Yeah, so let us know. You can drop a comment over on our Patreon, $2 a month. You can support the show and get a new bonus episode every month and a whole back catalog of almost 2 years of bonus episodes we've got piled up over there. You can also drop a comment on YouTube, and I try to answer almost every comment I can get to. Sometimes videos pop off and they get way too many comments, but I mean, that's a wonderful problem to have. And especially on the Saltburn video we did a few weeks ago, the comments have been so insightful and thoughtful and observant and curious and interesting. The stuff people have caught, the theories, the mythology they've read into, it's incredible.
It's been a true discussion over there.
It's been wonderful.
It's been so great.
And I think we've tried to sort of encourage and foster a constructive community like that here. So I'd love to see what you guys think about Star Wars and the franchise and what it means to you down in the comments. And you can also email us if you're more comfortable with that, secondbreakfastpod@gmail.com. We do these wildcard episodes every Tuesday covering any work of art that speaks to us and gives us something to blabber about. And every Friday, we've been doing this chapter-by-chapter exploration of A Game of Thrones. So you can check that out as well. By the way, we also did all of the Lord of the Rings books and all of the Witcher books. We've been doing this for a while.
There's a lot in there.
But we're currently on Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us for this discussion, and we'll be back in just a few days with a new Game of Thrones chat. Have a good, I was going to say weekend.
Well,
have a good midweek.
No, you got to sign it off right. You got to say, may the force be with you.
I don't, but you did.
Well, I said it. Yeah, there it is. It's out there.
May the 4th
Stop
be
it.
with. That really troubles me. That
that's the worst thing.
It makes my skin itch.
That
I don't
that
like
is
that.
millennial cringe to a T. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not.
All right.
All right. See you Friday.
Bye.